Welcome to the latest edition of the Kellen Association's Unplugged podcast. I am delighted today to be joined by Tom Vandenkendelaere. He has recently ended his political career, for now at least, and that's the perfect opportunity for us in industry at associations to get an insider view of the type of job that we are doing. Are we doing a good enough job at engaging with politicians? Are we engaging early enough? Is our understanding of the files realistic? Tom hopefully is going to share some insights and tips and feedback for us. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, happy to be here and happy to share my impressions of how well or badly you are performing.
Is your life a bit more chilled out than when you were a politician?
Well, it definitely is more chilled out, for sure. I discovered I have a family at home. I have now taken up the responsibility of doing all the duties that my wife had written on her sheet of paper for me for this afterlife. So it's an interesting period of time, yes. But it's also a period where I'm obviously on the lookout for a new position, and it brings some intense moments with it as well.
It seems you have a reputation for somebody who would engage in quite a positive and open way with industry. Not that you're necessarily their advocate, but that you're looking for a balance between their interests and other political interests. So do you think that, in terms of the associations that you engage with, that they are doing a good enough job to getting the best deal for their members?
Look, whenever I started with the mandate back in 2014, because I did 2 terms altogether, I realized that I wasn't the expert on all of the topics that I had to deal with, that I had to manage in the different committees. That was the moment for me to try and find out who are the serious voices around the table, who could bring information to me that would be of interest to me, and also who would be able to help me for my position. And that would be both industry and NGOs, which then bring me the arguments that I then have the responsibility of to deal with, and to base and to form my own opinion about it. I think there is a great deal of good associations, of good organizations on both sides or on all sides, let's say, of the spectrum. But there's definitely also some that could do a better job.
And how could they do that?
Well, that is obviously a difficult question to answer just in 1, 2, 3 things, but or in one, 2, 3 answers. But I think it all comes down to aligning as well as possible with what the politician is expecting at that point in time, to also bring facts to the table, not just a biased view and a simple argument. And I think to have a decent understanding of the lawmaking process in itself. You find out, or I found out at least, that a lot of people that I was meeting didn't, for example, understand simply how committees worked, how votes were prepared. Those are essential elements to be taken seriously by a politician in a lawmaking process where schedules are really full and where every half an hour is a very costly half an hour for everyone involved.
So some of us are not getting the basics right.
Well, I think that is what you could argue, yes. And even some very experienced people around Brussels would still check in with us, asking where we were at in the lawmaking process, who is now specifically involved in which file. Those are things of which, I would assume that a good trade association would do the work itself.
So you were engaging with industry, but what associations tell me is that compared to, say, 10 years ago, it's much harder to get the attention of MEPs than before, and MEPs are less likely to attend the association events. Do you think that's true? And if it is, why is that?
It is true, yes. And I see 3 reasons for this. First of all, industry needs to understand that whenever they want to interact with MEPs, that they're not just sending out a leaflet of information with raw messaging at perhaps also a level which is not the same level that the politician would expect. For example, I have colleagues who would only interact with CEOs. And I think that's a very rightful thing, because it is relevant, because it is the level at which you would want to be speaking. So bad preparation, let's say, on the industry side. Second element is obviously the negative connotation of lobbying in general. And I think there is a great part of responsibility there for industry itself to get this straight, to solve this issue, because the longer this goes on, the worse the image gets, the more reticent politicians will come to interact with industry, and rightfully so. I always sought a balance between interacting with NGOs, interacting with industry, precisely to find a balance also in my own mind, and to make sure that is working correctly.
But are you suggesting like unethical practices, bad lobbying, giving other lobbyists a bad reputation? Are they the things that still need to be addressed?
I think that there are issues there. I'm not saying that the majority of industry players are behaving badly, but I'm saying that this is a problem for sure, and everyone understands that there is a problem there. So it is up to industry to solve it. And thirdly and lastly, invitations are so numerous, organizations are so numerous that it is very hard to find suitable slots in diaries, in schedules, to be able to turn up to events, to be invited as guest speakers. Just allow me this illustration. If on a random Tuesday night I had to choose between speaking, let's say, to 40 of my direct constituents, or coming to speak to your audience of European industry players that are not necessarily my voters, then I know who to choose for, my 40 voters.
Yeah, because that's the part that we haven't discussed yet. So you're talking about finding the balance between the NGOs and industry, but you're trying to appeal to the values of your constituents, right? And isn't it difficult sometimes, because some of the issues at the EU Commission, at the EU Parliament are so obscure, to really translate them and make them relevant to the people that you want to vote for you.
And that's precisely where you need to also strike a balance in your schedule as to how much time you want to invest in that and how much time you want to invest in listening and interacting with experts, let's say, in the field, from the whole spectrum. And I think throughout time I realized when I want to convince voters, I need to make sure that they at least understand what I'm working on. And therefore I need to work on getting my messaging out, becoming my own lobbyist in a way for what I'm doing to convince them to vote for me next time.
Well, what that suggests is really getting down to the core issues that an association or an industry wants to defend and communicating that in clear language that will be understandable to a non-specialist audience.
Well, that is, I think, the responsibility of a politician to do that. I think a trade association can allow itself to really advocate for the specific concerns they are representing, for the specific sectors they are representing. And I even would say that trade associations should become much more specific and specialized in their communication with MEPs, really when it comes down to the files that are being negotiated and are on the table. I think too much time still is lost with generalities in a way.
Okay, fine. You're representing West Flanders and it's an area where there's a lot of agriculture. Did you see yourself as a defender of farmers in the Parliament, or was it about finding a balance between their interests and other interests?
I think at the outset what I very much wanted to do is finding a balance between, on the one hand, what the European Commission was proposing in terms of Green Deal, and on the other hand, the concerns that farmers had. However, throughout time, I realized when I saw the proposals coming out of the Commission and how ambitious they were, not necessarily to the benefit of farmers, combined with the economic situation in which farmers would find themselves on, that I felt I had to push harder on the advocacy side of farmers. And that is indeed where I let's say, took their side to really, for example, attack the nature restoration law, which is a particularly sensitive file for my region.
Do you think that farmers did a good job? Do you think that they represent a case study on how to advocate effectively?
I mean, at some point I really wondered, when is it now that they're going to come on the streets to really make their point? Because I had been sensing a lot of unrest among farmers when I went to go and visit them in their farms, but I hadn't seen that unrest sippling through, let's say, to Brussels. So I see a job there also in the future for improving advocacy. But I also think that the way in which they built up the momentum towards protests and then effectively coming out on the streets and obtaining the concessions that they were able to obtain, that was something well played on their side.
They got a result. So I mean, does that suggest that that is what groups should do?
Well, there is a caveat there. I don't think protests are, let's say, the go-to option when it comes to advocacy. Though that is really, and we saw it, a matter of last resort. It should never come that far. I think there are much steps that can be taken before that, and that are also able to achieve the same results.
So the protests were a sign that they were too late in the process?
In a way, yes.
Okay. And that's a lesson, I think, for industry groups as well, all sorts of groups.
You have to be much earlier involved in the process. You have to be out there much earlier. You have to approach your politicians much earlier, much more concretely. Don't waste time.
So we're looking at a new parliament now, a new dynamic. Do you think that's going to change things? Do you think that politicians generally will be more receptive to the interests of industry than they were in the last one?
I really believe it's a job for industry to make that case and to now already reach out to new parliamentarians and to present yourselves in a very concrete manner, but also to explain that you're not there just to come and lobby, but that you're there to explain who you are and what you want to do, but to be also specific on the files that are important, that are of importance to you.
But do you think just the political shift that has taken place, do you think that will change things? Do you think that means that associations need to adopt what they're doing?
Yeah, I think you have to take a look at the results of the elections. We have a very strong EPP, first of all. Extreme right came out less strong than everyone expected. Clearly, the left side of the House has been weakened. It means that now there is a centre-right coalition possible as an alternative, let's say, to the centrist coalition, whereas in the last term there was a centre-left coalition as an alternative to the centrist coalition. So I think there is a power shift in the House, and it is up to industry to use that power shift in an intelligent way.
Just for you personally, being an MEP, was that an opportunity for you to actually make a difference?
Yes and no. I think you need to be very well aware of what you're trying to do as a politician, and that is something I had to learn through the process. So an experienced politician coming in now knowing how high expectations can be or how not high they should be whenever entering the European Parliament, I think that is very useful. So yes, I was happy to work on specific files, to be able to change specific things, to convince, for example, some of my group colleagues to change their position with regards to a certain specific aspect of a file. Obviously, no, I'm not happy with, let's say, the overall feeling. I mean, I'm always wondering, what am I going to tell my kids? What have I changed in the European Parliament back in the day? And that is a very difficult question to answer, not in the least because of the very specific nature of the very specific file that you have been working on and the one or two amendments that you were able to get through.
Do you think that this is a permanent departure from politics, or do you think you'll eventually go back to it?
I guess that's a permanent departure from politics, but never trust a politician when he says that.
And so are you on the job market now?
Yes, I am. I mean, I have been applying for jobs. It was a useful point in time for me to update my CV since I was 25 years old, but also to pick up again on letter writing, on reaching out to the network you have built up, to see also how politicians are liked or not liked at some point, because that was for me something very interesting. Is that a political profile is a very useful profile in a way for industry and other players alike. But when it comes down to real job positions, there's in fact very little in which a certain politician has a specialty in, and that's a tricky one.
Well, I think it's clear that you can bring a lot of value in terms of informing association and industry advocacy organisations how to lobby, how to get their point across. Thanks for sharing this with us today. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Today. Welcome back to the latest edition of the Kellen Unplugged podcast. I am delighted to be joined by Adriana Nosewicz. She is Director and Practice Leader, Food and Nutrition at Kellen. We're going to be talking about democracy, not from the point of view of society at large, but just within associations. More specifically, how can associations leaders make sure that they are capturing the views of their members and sharing them effectively with policymakers? Adriana, thanks for joining us today. So we're talking about creativity in advocacy, and Brussels, I think, is a place where people like to play it safe. Do you have some examples for how you can really get your message across in a more creative way and really make a difference?
I have an example that worked and that I can share, that we used in EU salt last year when working on the delegated act on organic salt, where that Commission proposed and the European Parliament vetoed. So I was very proud to manage this campaign with the staff and with the members, because their role was very crucial. So what we did, we used not a typical position paper and just going and meeting everybody, but we did have, of course, the technical papers behind. But what the first tool was were the short infographics, short messages on social media, and we did use a little salt shaker that we sent to the European Parliament with a logo, with a short slogan that was organic, not really, with a little QR code you could scan and then read the position paper. And that was something that worked because it took the attention. It was not big, it was not aggressive, And it's something that stays for quite some time within the offices of of different people. Some of them take them home, but then they remember for quite some time EU Salt and the message that we were bringing.
So in terms of making the difference and actually getting the vote that you wanted, this salt shaker made the difference?
It seems. No, I wouldn't say. It's a full package. It's really the message that we had. It's really the arguments that we brought. But you need to grab the attention. And if you get the attention, if you have the meeting, if you manage to have this 30 seconds that they read what the 4 key arguments will be, then it's easier.
Tell us a bit about how you involve your members in this process of trying to advocate effectively.
You have to make things easier for them because they have a job. They have a job back in their country. They are paid by their companies, and you are there to help the business to strive. So if you need their help, because that's absolutely how it works with the European Parliament, you need people locally to speak to their representatives. You need to make their life easier. You need to prepare them position papers. You need to prepare the communications material, give them a mailing list, and explain what they have to do next, when to do next, because it's very important not to be too late, but also not to be too early in the process. You cannot be speaking about something on the agenda of, a couple of months later that will happen. You have to be just the moment when the MEP has the moment to look at what he will be working on the next week.
What's the biggest challenge you face in trying to coordinate members in this way?
The association is never a priority. It's always coming as on top of your daily work.
You have to sell it, right?
Absolutely. So you have to be relevant. You have to be business relevant. They have to feel heard. They have to feel that what they say matters, and that their effort that they put instead of running the business, but they put in this exercise is worth it. So that's your job.
Now, can this be very challenging? You had this great example from last year, but it's not often the case that you have an example like this. Sometimes the files that you can be working on can take years,
Absolutely.
Decades even. So is it also a challenge to make sure that they know that EU policymaking is relevant to them?
If you have an example like that, it's very easy later to keep them believing. Okay, they believe in the association now because they saw the change. They saw that what they did mattered, and they can continue doing it. But throughout the year, you have to continue the engagement. You have to go visit their facilities. You have to go and understand the business, how it really works, in order to be able to later even monitoring the different initiatives, telling them, guys, you know what, there is something that is being discussed. I think it might have an impact. Can we look at it together? So you need to know, you need to make them feel that it's important what they are doing by visiting them, by talking and understanding the business.
So you invest a lot in that, in building up your own industry knowledge and building up the industry knowledge of your staff?
Absolutely.
Okay, fine. What else can you share? I mean, I think we're looking at a situation where communication is becoming much more important, where we don't have as much of a window to get the attention of people both at the Commission and the Parliament than before. I guess this is something that's going to continue to develop in this direction. What else can you bring in order to make sure that you get people's attention?
Coalition building. Stakeholder management. So the fact that you actually come not only as this industry that is trying to sell something, but before you have your position, you already made your homework, you spoke to different people in Brussels, you managed to come later and say, hey, we are 4 of us here, 4 different organizations. We do believe that these things are important. It's not us only selling something, but also our users, our ingredients producers, and if you have the work with NGOs, it's even better. We do have another example.
Tell us.
I will. We do work with Iodine Global Network, who is actually
Iodine Global Network.
Right.
Exciting.
Ever have iodized salt? Mm-hmm. Something that's actually very important for the children, for the pregnant women, because that has a huge impact on your health. So actually, working with the NGOs, with others than the industry association, can help bring the message. So Iodine Global Network was actually working on the issue of iodine deficiency, came to EU Salt to asking for data that could support their reports. And actually, out of this beautiful coalition, we got a WHO report that calls the governments to actually address the issue of iodine deficiency, even in Europe, which is very sad.
So you had this success, you had an innovative campaign, but you need to keep building on this. What can we expect from you, from Kellen, in the years to come?
Oh, you will be so surprised. There is so much to come.
Okay. Thanks very much, Adriana.
Thank you.
Thank you.